Matt Murdock, the infamous blind lawyer, puts on a costume inspired by the devil and fights the underbelly of crime at night. What a contradictory mess of a character he is. The idea turned out to be a roaring success among readers, maybe because that's what every nerd wanted to do in their wildest dreams. But if you think it's difficult to maintain both jobs, you guessed it right. Matt was having a really hard time punching and slapping those villains all alone, and that's how the creators conjured up his twin brother, Michael Murdock. So who is he? Does he possess any superpowers like his twin brother Matt? Let's find out. But before we get started with the video, we have a small request for you. If you like our content, subscribe to us and like the video. It might just be a simple click for you, but it means a lot to us. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get started. Legal eagle by day, vigilante by night. If you're still thinking, why did Matt choose to be a vigilante? Don't you think it's just easier to fight in the dark when you're blind? Well, on a serious note, Matt was a righteous good man who believed in the justice system, but when he found his faith in the law and the justice system crumbling, he took the matter into his own hands by taking up this secret identity. But when he started having difficulty maintaining his secrecy, he came up with a cover-up to pose as his twin brother named Michael Murdock to keep his identity safe. In the original Daredevil storyline in 1964, issue number 25, Mike Murdock first made his debut in the comics. When Spider-Man recognized Matt's secret identity, he wrote a letter describing his thoughts on Matt's alias. Unfortunately, Matt's partners Karen and Foggy found this letter while he was out of town. Upon arriving in the States, he realized his secret identity was under scrutiny. Hence, he developed this false identity of Mike Murdock to frame him as the Daredevil. He gave him a new look, which included flamboyant clothing, a potty mouth, and a dashing personality, though it sounds like even a man with no fear went through a severe identity crisis at that point. Though initially, both Karen and Foggy were having a hard time digesting this news because Mike was a pain in the butt. He was the complete opposite of Matt's calm, composed, and sophisticated personality. At one point, he acted so crazy that Foggy even called him mental and questioned his credibility as the morally righteous Daredevil. The Mechanical Frog. In this issue, he also fought with a weird thief named Vincent Patilio, aka Leapfrog, who started creating chaos by looting the jewelry stores in the city, by donning a customized mechanical suit that allowed him to hop and move at faster speeds. Though Leapfrog was not a conventional villain, he managed to give Matt a hard time during his stint as the hopping thief of New York City. After a brief fight downtown, Daredevil captured him and handed him over to the authorities. But to everyone's surprise, Vincent asked Matt to be his public prosecutor and fight on his behalf, though he escaped from the court during the trial and lived an everyday life denouncing his Leapfrog persona. There's also a fascinating story about Vincent because he was not the last from his family to take up the frog persona, as later in the comics, his son Eugene Patilio revamped his father's legacy by taking up the Leapfrog persona later in different comics. But unlike his father, Eugene teamed up with Spider-Man and helped him fight the city's crime. If we talk about Mike, well, Matt deliberately arranged a scripted show about the death of his fictional twin brother and declared the rise of a new Daredevil. Rebirth of Mike Murdock. After decades of absence from the comics, Mike Murdock again appears in the comics in 2019 by the creator Charles Soule. Even though Matt got rid of his fictitious twin brother back in the 60s, sometimes the creators used the alias as a cover for the blind lawyer. However, when this character was getting a makeover in the 2019 edition, the creators thought of portraying him as a real-life character in the comics, unlike the fictional twin of Matt back in the day. In Daredevil Comics number 606, Kingpin had won the election, defeating Matt Murdock as the city's mayor, but after taking up the command, he turned the city into a tumultuous one filled with crime, disorder, and chaos. But Daredevil was still fighting against the Kingpin and his web of lies and corruption, and he had the help of another superhero, Frank McGee, a former security force member who had joined Matt in his quest to restore justice in the city. While on their mission to save the city from the control of Kingpin, Frank introduced Daredevil to one of the Inhumans, Reader. Being one of the Inhumans, the Reader had the power to manifest anything that he read. After their brief meeting, Daredevil left to stop a bank robbery. After stopping the robbers from looting the bank, Daredevil dropped by a villain-themed bar where a fight broke out between the villains. Daredevil stepped in and put a stop to it, but he met a man identical to his normal self. The man claimed himself to be Mike Murdock. When Daredevil asked him to reveal his identity by expecting him to be Mystique or any other shape-shifting villain, he kept calling himself Mike Murdock. Seeing his fake identity in front of him, which he once created to save himself from being exposed, made Daredevil really angry, and he punched him really hard. The Evil Twin. Then he took him to the Psychic Supreme of Inhumans, Sterilon, who after examining the guy, revealed that he was not lying at all. But he also told Daredevil that even though this guy was alive, he did not have any proper memories in his brain, as if he was just a fragment of a memory strain. Hearing this, Frank McGee advised Daredevil to take him to the Reader. When we learned the truth about this guy after his meeting with Daredevil, the Reader started researching him and fell asleep. However, during his sleep, his hand accidentally touched the documents where the Daredevil was talking about his brief stint as Mike Murdock to protect his identity, and that brought Mike Murdock into the real world. We must understand that if the reader can give birth to such situations, he can also disappear them by rewriting those events using his braille notes. But before he could disappear, the fake Mike woke up, took Reader's dog hostage, and fled from that place. What an obnoxious brat he is, right? After that, the fake Mike even managed to get into Matt's office and took his friend Foggy as a hostage. As helpless, Foggy took him to see Matt, who had already planned with the reader to erase Mike. Even this time, Mike successfully escaped from getting erased. Seeing Matt try to erase him from reality, Mike sought the help of the Mayor Kingpin. Even though Mayor Fisk denied his request, he later appointed him to his gang because he knew his rival's brother might come in handy in the future. Death of Mike Murdock. Later in the comics, he stole a powerful Asgardian stone from one of his allies, the Hood, and used it to convert himself into an actual human. This stone helped him to rewrite an entire new past where twin brothers Mike and Matt were raised by their single father, Jack, after their mom left them to become a nun. Matt studied hard, got into Harvard, and became a successful lawyer, whereas Mike befriended some criminals and chose the path of darkness forever. Soon he became a notorious criminal under the guidance of Mayor Fisk, and got involved in a few successful robberies with his friend Butch. But during a trial, Mayor Fisk killed him, mistaking him for his brother Matt. Marvelous verdict. In the original run, the character never really got a life of his own, because Matt was trying too hard to make him seem real, just to avoid unwanted attention. However, he admitted that his new persona freed him from his usual boring self, and allowed him to do things freely without any care. He even got to fulfill his wish to flirt with his assistant Karen, which he had been wanting to do for years, but he had to get rid of that character when things started to go downhill, and he himself got confused by his own tricks. He suffered from an identity crisis, portraying 3 different characters in front of the world. However, when the character reappeared in the comics almost 5 decades later, the creators gave him a better storyline and character arc, as this time they brought in a different person from Matt's memory. Born from the fragment of Matt's memories, he had no past. He was just a void vessel trying to figure out his existence in a world where he was no longer wanted. He's an extremely smart and powerful being, though he's not as powerful and trained as Daredevil. It was a fun adventure for Matt, because seeing a piece of memory come to life in the real world and turn into a villain is the worst thing that can happen to a lawyer like Matt Murdock. Would it be fun watching Daredevil fight a corrupt version of himself? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more interesting content on our channel. Have a great day!